Splitsville is a comedy that follows Carrie, played by Kyle Marvin. After his wife Ashley confesses to cheating and asks for a divorce, he runs over to his friends Paul and Julie for support, only to learn that the way they keep their marriage working is by keeping it open. This sends Carrie down a path of unorthodox decisions, from disrupting his friend's marriage to making arrangements of his own, all of which result in a whirlwind of over-the-top hijinks. So this is a screwball comedy that is more so carried by how animated and ridiculous it is, as opposed to being carried by its statements about relationships. But nevertheless, the commentary is there, and the big topic is relationship insecurities. This movie digs into the ways we behave in our relationships, how our doubts and fears can shape the choices we make, some of which may not be healthy decisions. It shows us all the unfair ways people act despite the permissions that have been granted and the boundaries that have been set. The biggest driving force for these characters is spite. The movie is a raw portrait of how responding to issues with retaliation is a slippery slope into a contemptuous relationship, whether that be with your partner or even just a close friend. A lot of the time someone feels wronged in this movie, they immediately turn around and try to do that person dirty. On the outskirts of our relationships, this movie digs into the social dynamics surrounding them, how we try to frame them as strong and well-maintained, when in reality they are less than perfect. People sometimes lie about how great their relationship is going to try and present themselves as functional and cooperative, and in a way they kind of lie to themselves. This movie presents that through these characters who each have a very self-assured idea of how their relationship is going when their partner seems to have a different one. And then of course the movie is also about non-monogamy. We follow characters who, despite not being in love with the idea of being in an open marriage, do it anyway to keep things afloat, and the results can be pretty ugly. This is not to say that non-monogamy is always a bad idea. Plenty of people make that work. But from what I've personally seen, it tends to be the people who are naturally non-monogamous and not the monogamous couples who are just trying that out. This movie sheds light on how when monogamous couples try being open, it can sometimes blow up in their faces, making the relationship even worse. The takeaway is, when in doubt, go without. So the commentary is there, but by no means should this movie be the basis for your conclusions about relationships or non-monogamy, because it is just utterly absurd. The hijinks make it absolutely hilarious. I don't think the marketing did this movie enough justice. I was sitting there in an empty theater by myself, laughing out loud. I didn't need a crowd or anything. It's funny for so many different reasons, with one of the big ones being that these characters all present themselves as very put together outside of their relationships, but inside of them, they all act like children. Though they all try to convince themselves and other people around them that they're totally cool with being open, the ways this impacts their relationships is disastrous in a very comical way. There's plenty of slapstick humor and plenty of raunchy humor that doesn't necessarily make the movie too smutty or explicit. The sexual themes are not over the top, and there's not really any sex in the movie that I recall. There's a little bit of nudity. You do see Carrie naked a few times. I will say that I did look it up, and he is in fact wearing a prosthetic. That will change the way you look at those scenes. The cinematography also really elevates the humor. For example, there's this one really long and drawn out fight scene that keeps swapping back and forth between the same two static camera angles, adding a very humorously monotonous perspective to this very ridiculous and immature fight. This movie also has a lot of long takes that really play off of comedic timing. Sometimes it'll hold on a very silly conversation and characters will humorously enter frame during them. But the biggest comedy engine is the character dynamics, how these characters play off each other despite having different personalities, made for comedy gold. Starting with Carrie, who can best be described by having golden retriever energy. For the most part, he's a really nice guy through and through, but perhaps a bit clueless at times. Kyle Marvin at first glance doesn't really strike me with leading man energy, but he was pretty great, though there is something to be said about his greatness being the result of how he blends with the supporting cast. Paul might seem very serious and put together at first, but he's actually really quirky and very insecure. And the more you start to realize that about him, the more entertaining he becomes. He's Carrie's best friend, and the ways they try to maintain that through all the conflict is what makes everything feel lighthearted when it could have easily felt tense. The surprise delight here is definitely Julie. Her character arc in the movie ends up being one of the more interesting aspects. I've reviewed a few of Dakota Johnson's movies before, And I'm not shy of criticizing her acting skills. On the better end, she's done roles like Daddy-O, Am I Okay, and Materialists, where I thought she was fine but not remarkable. I'd lump this role in with those, and honestly, this one solidifies the fact that she's probably not a leading woman. She is much better as a supporting actress. There's not a whole lot to say about Ashley. Adria Arjona is totally fine here, but this character tends to hum one of the same two notes whenever she's on screen. She was easily the least memorable of the four mains. Paul and Julie also have a kid. The fact that he rarely took up the frame by himself was also a great call. There's an element of humor to the fact that he's just often in the background riding waves while his parents partake in ridiculous antics. And then there are plenty of hilarious side characters, but honestly too many to mention. This movie is a wonderful melting pot of characters. As for shortcomings, I did not hate the ending, but I also did not love it. The movie was going in a solid direction by the end of the third act, and the big pivot at the end kind of undercuts the core subjects. So the biggest thing that might disappoint some viewers is how much the comedy takes precedence over whatever this movie is trying to say about relationships. As much as you might think that you're following the commentary very well for much of the movie, by the end, you will probably come to the conclusion that this movie is not a beacon of relationship advice. That might be a shortcoming to some viewers, but it definitely was not to me, because the movie still had plenty of ways to entertain through all of its absurdities. So I thought this movie was incredible. It is absolutely hilarious and wildly unpredictable, almost like an adult cartoon. I'm a little late on this one, but see it in theaters if you can, and bring friends to laugh with you. Just don't expect it to be the thing that opens your mind to non-monogamy. Thanks for watching this video. Please give it a like if it brought you any value at all. Later this week, I'm gonna be watching and reviewing Him and A Big Bold Beautiful Journey. I'm gonna try and go to a sneak screening tomorrow for One Battle After Another. If not, then you can expect that video next week.